Okay, I want you to imagine your favorite sports rivalry. Now imagine it getting so heated that it completely engulfs the capital city in flames and nearly brings down the entire government. Sounds insane, right? Well, it actually happened. We're going to get into the incredible story of how one chariot race in the Byzantine Empire kicked off a revolution that was written in blood. Nika! Nika! It means win, win. It's what you'd scream for your favorite chariot driver. But in the year 532, something changed. Two bitter rival fan bases, the Blues and the Greens, started chanting it together. And they weren't looking at the racetrack anymore. No, this time, they were screaming it right at their emperor. This right here, this is the Hippodrome of Constantinople. You have to understand, this was the absolute heart of the city. It was the center of entertainment, of life itself. But for one terrifying week, it became the epicenter of a riot that brought the most powerful empire on earth to its knees. And in the end, it became a stage for a horrific massacre. So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did a bunch of sports fans, we're talking the ancient version of die-hard soccer fanatics, unite to burn their own city, try to crown a new emperor, and almost send their actual ruler running for his life? Let's unpack this. The whole situation just exploded with terrifying speed. We're not talking about a little protest here. This was all-out urban warfare. For 5 whole days, the mob ran the city. They were setting fires everywhere. And here's the thing you have to realize. Constantinople didn't have a police force like we do. There was nobody to call. The emperor, a guy named Justinian, was literally barricaded inside his palace, watching his grip on power just evaporate. To really get how things got so explosive, we have to rewind a bit and talk about the cultural obsession that was at the center of it all, chariot racing. You have to understand, this was so much more than a sport. For many people, it was everything. You might have heard the term bread and circuses. It was a classic Roman strategy that the Byzantines adopted. The idea is simple. Keep the people fed and give them spectacular, violent entertainment, and they don't have time to think about rebelling. Well, chariot racing was the ultimate circus. It was a spectacle of speed, danger, and glory that had everyone totally captivated. And when I say brutal, I mean it. Imagine 12 chariots, each with 4 horses, thundering around this incredibly narrow track. There were barely any rules. Crashes weren't just common, they were expected. A lot of these drivers were superstars, but they were also almost guaranteed to die young, either crushed against a wall or dragged to their death by their own horses. The teams themselves were organized into what were called factions. There were 4 originally, but by the time our story takes place, they'd basically consolidated into 2 massive super factions, the Blues and the Greens. And their fans were, well, fanatical. Their rivalry would constantly spill out of the stadium and turn into straight-up riots in the streets. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Historians have debated what these factions really were. The traditional thinking is that they were almost like early political parties. The Blues, they were the establishment team. The rich, the landowners, the religiously orthodox. The Greens were seen as the team of the common man, the merchants, the workers, often linked with some pretty controversial religious views. Now, some modern historians think it was really just about the sport, but it's impossible to deny that your team color said a lot about who you were. Okay, so into this absolute pressure cooker of sports, politics, and religion step our 2 main characters, Emperor Justinian and his wife, Empress Theodora, a real power couple whose entire lives were wrapped up in this fierce rivalry. And here's the huge problem. They weren't neutral referees. Not at all. Both Justinian and Theodora were famous, lifelong, die-hard fans of the Blue faction, and they weren't quiet about it. So if you were a Green supporter, this felt personal. It felt like the emperor himself was picking a side, and it wasn't yours. We have to talk about Theodora for a minute because her story is just wild. She was not your typical empress. She literally grew up in the circus. Her dad was a bear keeper for the Green faction. She later became an actress, which back then was a profession that basically meant you were also a courtesan. By all accounts, she was stunningly beautiful and incredibly smart, and she came from the very bottom of society. So how did the daughter of a Green bear keeper become a fanatical Blue? Well, when her father died, her mother pleaded with the Greens to give her new husband a job. They said no, flat out rejected them. But the Blues, they saw a chance. They stepped in, offered help, and gave him a job. That one move earned Theodora's unshakable, die-hard loyalty for the rest of her life. So you've got this city just simmering with resentment. People are mad about high taxes, they're divided over religion, and the emperor openly cheers for one sports team over the other. The whole city was a powder keg. All it needed was a single spark. And in January of 532, it got one. Just listen to how fast this all went down. January 10th, there's a brawl. And Justinian, trying to look fair, arrests leaders from both teams. But then, the public execution goes wrong. A blue and a green prisoner both survive the hanging. People saw this as a miracle, a sign from God. So at the next races, the whole crowd, blues and greens together, start begging Justinian for mercy. He says no, and that was it. The stadium erupts with Nika. The mob pours out into the city. And just a few days later, they're literally crowning a new emperor of their own. So back at the imperial palace, it is absolute pandemonium. The city is gone, the army is on the fence, and the emperor himself has completely given up hope. Justinian is ready to run. He's done. He sees no other way out. His advisors are already prepping the ships in the harbor. The Byzantine Empire is literally minutes away from being overthrown, not by some foreign army, but by its own sports fans. But then there's Theodora, the woman who grew up in the circus, who understood the mobs. While the emperor and all his tough generals were panicking, the former actress stood her ground. This was her moment. She reportedly stood up in front of all these terrified men and gave an incredible speech. She told them they could run if they wanted, the sea was right there, the ships were ready, but she ended by saying, "Consider first whether, when you reach safety, you will regret that you did not choose death in preference." It was a legendary moment that basically shamed every single one of them into staying to fight for the throne. So, inspired, or maybe just profoundly shamed by his wife, Justinian stayed, and he gave his top generals, Belisarius and Narses, a very simple, very brutal order: end this, now. And the response was just horrifyingly effective. The generals marched their troops right back to the Hippodrome, where all the rioters were still celebrating. They sealed every single exit, and then they just went in and started killing everyone. An estimated 30,000 people, blues and greens alike, were butchered that day. That was almost 10% of the entire city's population. And just like that, it was over. The rebellion was drowned in a sea of blood. The guy they had crowned emperor was executed. All their demands were ignored. Justinian's power was now absolute, secured by a massacre, right in the same stadium where it had all started. The Nika Riots changed everything. Chariot racing never really recovered. But the intense passion that fueled the riot, that didn't go away. It just found a new home. The empire's new national sport became arguing about religion. And believe it or not, the theological conflicts that followed would tear the empire apart in ways that made the rivalry between blue and green look like a friendly game.